Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
How are you today?
I can't complain. You?
Same. Same. So we did the slip stitch, right? We didn't do the Hong Kong hem, correct?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Did you have a good week?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. My schedule was a little funny this week, but okay, maybe we did do the Hong Kong finish because I don't remember it at all, but I have one that's curved.
Okay, so the Hong Kong finish is going to be a piece of fabric with a hem sewn to it with the bias binding on the edge, then blind slip stitch to the piece.
Oh, I don't have one that has two different.
All right, so we didn't do it.
Okay. Maybe I just put it in the wrong section.
Well, we did it last semester, so maybe Ashley could be our tiebreaker. Ashley, did we do the Hong Kong finish on the hem, or did we just do the finish on the seams?
I think we did the hem.
So we did it where we used the 1 2x6, right?
I think so.
I couldn't find my example. So we'll let Christine be you guys are probably right. If you are, we're just going to move on to blind stitches and we're going to do the rest of our blind stitches today. And then studio time. So I should keep better notes.
This is the example that I have.
No, that's the finish. That's the Hong Kong finish to the seams. So this is a hem finish where this is our self, our facing, and then bias bind the facing and then slip stitch it to the garment.
Yeah, that sounds different.
Okay, perfect. I was like, I don't have that example. I'm gonna see if I can dig through it. I'm waiting for Christine to show up, and then that's what we'll go ahead and talk through our earlier stitches that we did last week. We'll demo the Hong Kong hem, and if there are times, we'll introduce the catch stitch and the blind catch stitch, and we'll kind of talk about how all stitches can become blind stitches. So we'll just wait for Christine, and I'm gonna dive through my old notebook to see if I have an example. I've been teaching this class in a variety of different ways for a variety of different years. So I have like a lot of samples. No, that's not it. Zippers. Belts. Wonderful. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Christine. Okay. Let us get to it. So last class, we introduced the Hong Kong finish, which was the bias binding around each seam allowance edge, correct? If we had two seams together, it was bias bound on either side. Does anyone remember when we would use a Hong Kong finish or a clean finish? Yes.
In something that's structured but not lined.
Yes, exactly. Something structured and not lined. And typically we would use the bias either of self or something lighter weight. So we have our demo that we did for our Hong Kong finish. And then we did a how to tie the thread with your, I guess it's still two hands, but it's a quicker double or triple knot. And we talked about the slip stitch, and we demoed the slip stitch as a blind slip stitch where we only grabbed one yarn when we grabbed the face of the fabric. Today, we're going to combine that Hong Kong finish with the slip stitch to do our Hong Kong hem. And so this is another more refined way to finish a garment. So it's a better price point, a more expensive garment. I have also here a good illustration of what we're going to be doing. Our Hong Kong hem, I'm kind of jumping into it pretty quickly, aren't I? Hello, welcome to class this week. And I think it's week 5. And today we're going to finish up with our Hong Kong hem and then jump into our blind stitches. So we're going to be talking about how all stitches can be blind stitches. We're going to be introducing the catch stitch, which is a very secure stitch, as well as a couple different blind stitches. So, but we can utilize. So jumping straight into our Hong Kong hem, we are going to start with I apologize. I just jumped straight into it. Today's example, if you still have your 1x6 bias, that's great because we're going to use that for our Hong Kong hem. Our 2x6 inch from last week I had you cut. And then today we'll need 2 additional 4x6s for our fabrics. So, because we'll use one 4x6, we'll do a catch stitch on one side, and then we'll do a blind catch stitch on the other. And then same with the other 4x6, we'll do the 2 different blind stitches on either edges. And then our Hong Kong is going to require 1 4x6, 1 2x6, and 1 1x6 on the bias. Can I get a thumbs up or nod if you have all those materials? Excellent. Perfect. Sorry for just jumping straight in. So our Hong Kong hem is a hem that we're going to see. We can see this on a heavier material fabric as well. We'll see this on a higher quality garment. It adds a little bit of extra weight with a nice edge, nice additional finish seam edge. So if we did a Hong Kong finish or clean finish inside a garment that has completely like a heavy material, like a pair of trousers, and then we were going to hem the bottom of the trousers, we would follow this with the Hong Kong hem so that we still see that bias strip edge in the in the hem as well, so that we see that consistently through the garment. So I think this image it's okay, but I think this description is really great. And let's talk through it really quick before we jump into it. So usually heavier weaves, we'll often see them unravel. So we'll want to have this, it just gives it a little bit more security for fabric that will unravel or fray more frequently. We're going to start with our pre-cut bias seam or bias tape. So if you have bias tapes, you can use that as well. I just cut myself my own. We're going to start by sewing our facing piece to our self piece like this. We will fold this up around, and then we will bias bind this edge just like we did our Hong Kong finish, as if this is the seam allowance edge. And then we'll fold this up and we'll slip stitch this biased edge to our self piece so that our finished piece is nice and clean. Roger? I'll demo it, so it'll be okay. So this image, just like before, we're gonna sew this one doesn't have you do a separate facing. I like to see it, I do mine with a separate facing piece. This one does have a separate facing piece. This is how I initially learned how to do it, where we have our separate facing piece that we bias bind, trim, and then fold over, and then finally slip stitch to the garment. So we'll start by sewing our facing to our self. We'll sew our bias binding right here to our facing. We'll trim the edge, fold, just like we did the Hong Kong clean finish. And then finally, we will slip stitch, a blind slip stitch, that bias edge to the self. I know, lots of weird vocabulary. So I'm going to start by doing a 1/2 inch seam with my facing to my self. So I have my facing piece sewn to my self piece. I can press. I'm going to press my 2 edges of seam allowance down towards the self so that this edge is free to sew my bias binding to. So I'm going to first start by pressing this down so it's nice and free. My little iron. I am then going to line up my bias binding. So my 1/4 inch bias edge, trim it down to 1/8 inch and roll it around. I'm going to have it, my seam allowance is on this side. This is my facing, the face of my facing piece. This is the face of my bias tape, face to face. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam. It's easy if you have some fabric that's printed, it will be a little bit more clear visually, I think. Oh, come on. I've only been sewing 40 to 60 hours on you every week. I'm joking, I'm not sewing that much.
Christine, a question.
Yes.
Are we supposed to be sewing along with you or just watching you this first time?
Just watch me do this and then I want you to sew on, but I'm trying to explain each of these steps so that's really
Yeah,
clear.
just let me know when it's time for me to move my computer to the other side of the room.
Perfect. So I'm going to do this demo first, then I'm going to put the screen share back up where you can see my step-by-step images, and then you're going to sew it. And so I'm going to do my 1/4 inch. Not pulling my bias tape because I don't want it to be smaller than its intended cut size. Just going to trim it down to the size of the facing. So now the raw edges together, my facing and myself. Then I have my bias binding sewn 1/4 inch here. I'm going to now trim my bias bound and facing seam down to 1/8 inch. I'm going to press my bias binding up, press my bias binding to touch that cut edge, the edge, and then press it one more time over. So let me press it each step and show you. So first I start by pressing that cut edge up. My next is going to be pressing this to touch. The bias tape edge, raw edge to touch the clipped edge, or just shy of the clip edge works as well. So I have that edge touching here. And now finally, I'm gonna roll this over just barely past that stitch line so that I can stitch in the ditch on this side. So I'm here, I'm gonna press this one more time so that my bias binding is just over my stitch line that I just did. It's just sitting over that stitch line. I'm now going to stitch in the ditch right here along my piece to create that Hong Kong finish along this edge. My last step after that will be to press my facing up towards myself on the inside and slip stitch the bias binding blindly to the self. So stitch in the ditch real quick. What are you doing? I'm hoping to take this into the shop tomorrow to get service finally. It's only been 4 years. I've been doing it mostly on my own, but it's gotten to the point where I can't quite diagnose it, and I think it might need another part, or you know. But I've been able to take good care of it for a while. So my bias bound edge is stitched in the ditch. Second to last step is I'm going to press this up. So this is myself, and this is the inside with my face piece with the bias bound edge. And now I'm simply going to slip stitch this to here. So why don't you go ahead and get started? I'm going to hand slip stitch this. So I'll have my camera on and you can see me slip stitch. I'll also share screen with my, what I think is the better images. I'm going to use black so that it's more visible for you. So my demo makes more sense. One of the things that's been kind of driving me crazy with the pandemic is I'm not sure if each of you have the same habit, but I like to put my thread in my mouth to moisten it before I thread my needle. And my mouth is now covered with my mask, and I cannot do that when I'm in person teaching. My slip stitch demo here from last week. I'm simply going to do that same stitching, anchoring my knot in my bias binding, going over 2 millimeters and grabbing a single yarn, and then coming back.
Christine.
Yes.
So I just forgot how to do a certain step.
Yeah.
I attached, I forget what this is called, the 2x6 piece.
The 2x6 is our facing piece.
Okay, so I attached the facing and then next I have to put the binding on.
Yeah, so press your facing towards the self. So away from the facing piece. Yes, press it up. And
Okay,
then you're going to attach your bias binding, oops, your bias binding to your facing piece, right sides to right sides. So if our facing piece, oh, I did the wrong stitch. I guess I can't talk and do it. So our facing piece, if this would be the right side, the face of the facing, and this would be the right side, the face of the self. And if to make it more clear, you can write on your piece. This will be the garment. And this is the, or we'll just say the face of the garment. And this is our facing. And this is the face of the facing. So the face faces out on the facing. The face faces out on the garment on the opposite side. And then this is the bias. And this is the face of the bias. Does that make more sense? Or did I just go further?
I think.
Here, let me demo it one more time. Give me a second and I will. Got some material right here. Go ahead and cut this in half. So I have my facing. So I'll write all of this on here so it makes more sense. Facing. Face. So this is the facing face. This is the garment face. So I'll just put GF. So right sides together, face to face. I'm going to put my facing right sides together with my garment. I'm going to sew my 1/2 inch. Attach them together. Excellent. So that is my, oops, my facing face to my garment face. I'm now going to press my seam allowance up towards the back of the garment. I'm going to take my bias. I'm going to write on here, bias face or BF. And right sides together with my facing face and my bias face. I'm going to line them up and sew 1/4 inch, my bias and my facing face together. So the right sides together right now. I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch, my bias to my facing, again, not pulling the bias because I don't want to make it smaller than it is currently. So I'm here, my garment face, my facing face, my bias face. They're all on the same side. I'm going to trim the seam allowance here where my bias and my facing came together down to 1/8 inch. I'm going to press my bias up, press my bias edge to touch or just before to touch that 1/8 inch, and then finally press it over so it just is just past the stitch line. So my 1/8 inch cut is now pressed up towards the bias binding. I'm now going to press the edge of my bias binding just to touch or just before to touch right here, the cut edge. So I have my bias now pressed to touch the cut edge that I clipped down to the 1/8. The last pressing I'm going to do with the bias before stitching in the ditch is to press it over just past the stitch line, just a little bit past the stitch line, so that when I stitch on the ditch on the other side, I capture the top of this. I have it pressed over, just touching. So this is just past that stitch line, that initial stitch line of the bias to the facing. I'm going to stitch on the ditch on this side, which is my face side up. That seam so that I capture that bias binding. Oh, I didn't press it over far enough. Do you see how it didn't capture full the way? So make sure you press it just far enough over. So this is a good bad example because I didn't quite get it pressed all the way over, but I did for most of it, just a small spot. So if it was perfect, I would then press my facing up to the back side of my garment piece and then slip stitch along that bias bound edge. Was that more clear, Ashley?
Yeah, it was. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm going to go back to demoing. My blind slip stitch. Oof. This is a great way to add a little bit of extra color, just a secret color for you. Also, if you don't Hong Kong finish all your other seams, you can have this bias binding be a nice pop of color and your facing being the same as the self. It's a good way to add some visual interest, but secret visual interest because it's on the inside of the garment. How's everyone's Hong Kong hem coming along? Ah, that slip stitch looks great. Excellent. I can't even see it on the other side. Beautiful. Beautiful. How about yours, Christine?
My stitch in the ditch could be better. And this material is kind of hard. It's like like a thick cotton, like a pretty hefty cotton weave.
Uh-huh.
And it's hard to get one thread without
Oh,
breaking the thread.
oh yeah. Oof. Okay, we'll do your best.
Yeah, I'm trying. And I have one question actually while I have you. What I bought some off the shelf bias tape.
Perfect.
Any differences when you're doing it because it's already pressed? Like,
No, you'll just stitch it in the fold line. So if you have double fold, you'll have 3 folds in the tape.
yeah.
So you'll stitch it in this first fold line, trim it, and then fold it over, and then fold it over just along itself, and then slip stitch it. Yeah. How about you, Ashley? How is your Hong Kong hem coming?
Good. I'm just starting to do my, stitching. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed that Riley, your slip stitch is so quick. You're getting so good.
Practice.
Yep.
I've only done it in class though. I need to practice more, but I have a lot of pants to hem. So I mean, this will come in handy.
Well, the slip stitch, I'm also going to show you today the catch stitch and the blind catch stitch. So you can take a look depending on the material of your hem. So catch stitch is really good because of how much more secure it is than the slip stitch. In a way, if you take a look at this image, it's like latticed, kind of like how you'll see bridges and stuff. So it's like got a little bit more security because you stitch up, come back, stitch over, come back, stitch up, come back. So you're stitching forward and back. It's like you're giving little back stitches with each stitch. So we're going to be doing that. Here we have a catch stitch, and here we have the blind catch stitch where we're stitching just on the inside. Your blind catch stitch is blind on either side that you're stitching. So this has a pinked edge. And then the catch stitch here, so you can choose how many threads are going in between here and here, if that makes sense. A blind stitch would be simply when on yourself, you're only grabbing 1 yarn, but on the facing, you can grab more. Or a non-blind, you grab this equal amount on either piece. And then we're also gonna do our whip stitch, which is our blind whip stitch, where we're grabbing just a single yarn and whipping around the piece. So we'll do a quick demo of that, as well as a vertical hemming, where it's very similar to the whip stitch, except that you're coming up each stitch. So we'll demo that as well.
Which book are these pictures in?
Oh, great question. Complete Guide to Sewing, Reader's Digest. Any edition is great for this. This book itself is from like, I think 1973. 1976. And each book, each edition has like these bonus projects at the end, which are very entertaining. And they really speak to the times that the book was written. So we got this fish rug, sailboat shade, convertible quilt sleeping bag. My favorite is the giant pencil. Let me see if they have all these little projects, and they show you how they have mini patterns in here. Barrel bag. Come on, pencil, pencil, pencil. Look, the skirt can also be worn over your shoulders. The pencil pillow.
That's funny.
I have yet to make any of these giant ones, but yeah, they're very entertaining. And you can find this book for like $1 at, or like a couple of bucks at Half Price Book. I know there's a Half Price Books in Berkeley, and I think there's one in Oakland as well. And then there's also online, you can find it any edition, so it doesn't have to be newer, because sewing machines haven't really advanced more that you need much of an update. The only thing that I noticed that updates between the editions are those bonus projects at the end. So as Ashley, you keep slip stitching, I'm gonna switch to demoing the catch stitch. Where's my first catch stitch? There we go. So the catch stitch is similar to the slip stitch. The difference is that, like I was explaining earlier, is that it's lattice back and forth, back and forth. So you stitch forward to stitch back, you stitch forward to stitch back, you stitch forward to stitch back. And this is going to be on either side of the garment. So what we will do is we'll just take a single 2x4. We're going to fold it over a 1/4 inch and then fold it over a 1/4 inch again, or a 1/2 inch, 1/4 and a 1/2 along the 6-inch side. And that way we'll use that edge as our hem edge. We're going to do a visible catch stitch where we do equal amount of thread that we're grabbing in the folded as well as the face of the fabric. And then on the other 2x6, we'll do a 1/4 and a 1/2 as well, pressing, and we'll do a blind catch stitch where we grab just a single yarn on the self, but we're going to grab multiple yarns on the facing or the rolled edge. So you can keep slip stitching if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and start by pressing my one side 1/4 and then 1/2. And then for the hand stitching, I'm going to use my phone because I think it's easier for me to look through this camera to demo it versus to look at the TV or the screen and then just all over the place. So I don't think we did catch stitch in last semester. So this is a great, really secure, sturdy blind stitch or stitch to have in your back pocket. All stitches are essentially stitches that can be blind as long as you only grab a single yarn on the self side. That's what's going to make it a blind stitch. So I'll start here. Where's my... Excuse me. I always insist on drinking sparkling water and then I belch, so I apologize. I have my thread. I'm going to start with my knot. Excellent. And for my catch stitch, just like how I have in that image, I'm going to go ahead. I always like to anchor my knots in my fold edge here. I'm going to come up to the fabric. Do you see how my needle is reverse what my slip stitch was? And come up to the fabric. And this is the first one we're doing. We're going to do equal up and down. So I'm going to grab, 4, 6, about 1.5 millimeter stitch and come up. And then I'm going to come down onto my facing and just grab my facing piece, same 1.5 millimeter stitch. So this is our catch stitch. I'm going to reverse my needle again, come up, grab 1.5. And then come back down. Oof, look at that needle wanting to unthread itself. Don't do that. So I'm creating these little X's. And then I'm going to continue this all the way across. Catching each time. It's like the saying, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? We move forward with our stitch, and then our next stitch is back. And then we keep moving forward and then back. Okay. And if you want, just to save us time, when you get about halfway done with doing the even catch stitch, look, I'm so uneven, go ahead and then do the blind catch stitch. And our blind catch stitch will be very similar. The only thing that will change is that we'll still do that 1.5 on the fold edge right here. We're just going through that folded edge. But when you come up to do your back stitch, you're just simply going to grab a single yarn, maybe 2 yarns, 1 to 2 yarns. Come up and over. And if you want to make it double blind, how you'll do that is instead of coming over this fold edge to make our crisscross, we're going to go under this fold edge and do our 1.5 millimeter stitch. Come up, grab our single yarn. And then come back under. What do you think the advantage could be to be doing a double blind catch stitch versus a blind catch stitch or just a regular catch stitch? No wrong answers. Well, one of the advantages that looks very advantageous to me is that if these threads right here, as I put my foot through my pants, say, there's extra yarns for my hands or my feet to get caught on wherever my hem is, versus here, my catch stitch is in between the fold and it's less likely to get caught with it being flat on the fold edge. So this is the regular catch stitch. You see those little stitches. Here's my single blind catch stitch, and here's my double blind catch stitch. So you can't see a difference between the single and double blind on this side, but on this side, our double blind, we have it inside our fold edge. a nice clean. And you can double blind your slip stitch too, so that the stitch is more on the inside, or but you actually the slip stitch is already in the fold as it goes over. No, you can't double blind the slip stitch. You can only double blind the catch stitch. That's right. Sorry. Oh boy, Christine. Not you, Christine. Me, Christine. And I think this is why I jumped right out of the gate at the beginning of class. I think we're just about done with lecture time today, but I'll demonstrate the other two stitches for you so that you can see them, or I can wait and we can all do them next week, just so that you have more blind stitches under your belt. If we do them next week, we'll have more studio time, because I'll just have simply blind stitches being our focus next week for those last few stitches, and we'll kind of talk about them. And then the following week, we're going to get into some ruffles and flounces. And it takes practice, but the more consistent your stitches, the better. I'm not sure if I'm being very consistent myself. We'll just do the last two blind stitches next class and have a longer lab time. And then we'll move on to flounces and ruffles the following. Oh, and I got even more fabric to add to our book. But I've got a ton of entries. I'm gonna start organizing them a little bit more because right now they're a little all over the place. And I'm foreseeing soon being done with this. I'm gonna be right back. Get more water. Excuse me. Hey, Kagome. Sorry, my cat is very loud. No. Yes, Kagome. Sorry, I'll mute myself too. So we are in the last 5 minutes of class. Where is everybody in their build? How are things going? Ashley, let's start with you. Or Christine, whoever unmutes first.
All right, I'll go first. So I am still having waistband issues, but to be fair, I did not spend much time this week. Unfortunately, I had a crazy week. So I actually think I got over my mental block and made really good progress today. And I just
Right.
want to say, I cannot believe how fast our studio time flew.
Yeah,
I was totally in the zone.
yeah, it happens like that. But I always try to make sure you have dedicated time. So that
Yeah.
you can, get
Yeah,
things
no,
done.
and I tried all weekend to make it happen, and I just had one of those weeks. So anyhow, I am feeling good about my creative blockage.
And
being-
then what's going on with your waistband? Are you getting through that okay? Or
yeah. So basically it's sort of semi-pleated, and then it said you might have to gather. And I realized that this fabric is it's not really the gathering type of fabric, that cotton's just a little bit too thick to really do it well. So I just added a couple more pleats.
Oh, great. Great
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah. And part of the hard part was trying to make the pleats symmetrical so that it wasn't like extra pleated on one side and not on the other. So that was just kind of I don't know, like a logistical, practical problem that I was just not up to dealing with, but I've conquered it.
Good. Great problem solving. Riley, how about you?
I'm still in the cutting phase.
Hey, no worries. You have a difficult fabric to cut because of the pile, and you'll have to be very careful about the direction of the material. So spend your time cutting. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So good. And then Ashley.
I just attached like sleeves onto the thing. So they're like triangles.
Yes, because they're raglan sleeves. Wonderful, wonderful.
And then I'm trying to attach the, what is it called?
Skirt.
Waist insert front.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
It's looking so good. Beautiful. Great job, Ashley. Well, I'm still here for the next few minutes and then break and then next class. So
So I have a question.
yes.
For my pattern, it wants me to do 2 of the yoke, one on the inside and one on the
Yes.
outside. With my fabric, would it be weird to have that fabric on the inside?
Because your fabric is pile weave and it's heavier, I would recommend doing your lining material as your inside yoke. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Okay, and I'll say goodbye now. Thanks.
Oh.
Great class today.
Bye, Christine. Okay, well, I will see everybody in a half hour. Well, I won't. Yes, I do see you, Ashley, in a half hour. Okay.
Again.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.